Another round of nuclear talks between Iran and the P5+1 comes to an end with no tangible progress. The Iraqi army continues with its push to root out ISIS militants from the western province of Anbar. Terrorist attacks across Syria killed dozens of civilians as government troops continue to secure more ground. And Moscow slams a UN report on rights abuses in eastern Ukraine, saying it whitewashes Kiev's actions.
We're talking about issues that have to do with intimidation.
Hello there, you're watching Ali Tijah World News and I'm Fatima Basim. Iran and the six world powers wrapped up the fourth round of nuclear talks in the Austrian capital, Vienna. Both sides have described the meetings as constructive, but with no tangible progress so far.
The fourth round of nuclear talks between foreign ministers from Iran and the six world powers ended on the third day of negotiations in Vienna. Following the meeting, Iran's chief nuclear negotiator Abbas Araghchi reported no tangible progress at the talks, adding that gaps remain but reiterated Tehran's determination to continue the talks in the coming months.
Well, I think it's not unusual not to achieve an agreement in the very first session, in the very first round of negotiations. It is, in fact, this round of negotiations was, in fact, the first real negotiations between Iran and 5+1 or 3+3, whatever. In previous sessions, in three rounds of negotiations in Vienna, we had in fact brainstorming practice. And we tried to understand each other's positions on different subjects, on different issues, and try to make those viewpoints and positions of each side closer to each other. In this round, we really engaged in real negotiations, trying to draft what we think can be an agreement.
Earlier, a source close to the Iranian delegation said that the West has to abandon its excessive and unrealistic demands, after a U.S. official voiced concern at the lack of progress, describing the 3 days of talks in Vienna as being slow and difficult. Speaking on state television, Araghchi later dismissed the comments.
Both sides adopt certain stances in the course of negotiations, and there are different interpretations of such stances. At this juncture, what matters is that all the parties are seriously following up the negotiations, and we hope that the talks would proceed logically and rationally based on realism and in fact come up with our favorable results.
The talks in Vienna aimed at securing a permanent deal on the extent of Tehran's nuclear activities began on Wednesday, but progress appeared to be taking place at a slow and difficult pace. The parties want to clinch a deal by July 20th, when a November interim deal expires, under which Iran froze certain activities in return for some sanctions relief.
On July 20th, the first step of the Geneva Agreement will come to its end, and if we do not reach any conclusion, then we have to make a decision about ways and means for continuing this agreement, and it's possible to extend the agreement, but this will be feasible for only another 6 months, because 1 year has been designated as the time required for reaching the final agreement. So if we do not reach the agreement till July 20th, we still have 6 months left in order to continue the negotiations and come up with the necessary conclusion.
The Islamic Republic has long expressed its willingness to solve the disputes through diplomatic solutions and iron out differences to start drafting a final deal that would end the decade-long standoff over Iran's nuclear energy program. Should success prevail, This could help Tehran and the Western world normalize relations. Yet in the event of failure, it would have the potential of sparking conflict and a regional nuclear arms race.
Meanwhile, the Iraqi army has intensified its shelling of Fallujah in the western Anbar province in preparation for a ground assault to regain control of the city, which has been under al-Qaeda militants' control for over 5 months.
It's now only a matter of time before these extremist militants' rule comes to an end, as the operation aimed at eliminating al-Qaeda insurgents in Iraq's northern city of Fallujah continues. Iraqi military forces renewed their shelling of Fallujah on Thursday morning, in preparation for a ground assault to reclaim the city, located in Iraq's western Anbar province. At least 12 militants from al-Qaeda affiliate the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant were reportedly killed this morning in clashes with members of the Iraqi army and tribesmen. Tribesmen and the army have been working together to counter the al-Qaeda insurgents. This comes as government forces are reportedly stationed 5 minutes from Fallujah, awaiting the green light from Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki to launch their operation. The government has delivered an ultimatum to anyone still inside the city to leave or to be treated as a supporter of al-Qaeda. The ultimatum coincided with Iraqi officials warning militants that government forces were preparing for a major attack in Fallujah and that the city should wait for what is coming, a reference to the impending major assault.
Earlier, our Baghdad correspondent Wissam al-Bayati gave us a first-hand account on the military operation in Fallujah, saying that the ground assault is well underway in eliminating ISIS militants from the area.
The forward base where the latest actually combat and military confrontation has been taking place since yesterday, and this is the ISIL base, and used to be the ISIL base until the Iraqi army, backed by the Iraq's defenders forces, who have actually been backing up the Iraqi army since the very beginning of the military operations in the province of Anbar and the city of Fallujah. As you can see in this area, this complex is considered the hardcore for the ISIL members and the headquarters. And if you can see the other complex over there, right behind the first complex, it used to be the headquarters for the masterminding the military operations against and the terrorist attacks against the Iraqi people and the Iraqi security forces. In addition to what we can see in this area, until a few hours ago, 3 hours ago, almost 3 hours ago, the Iraqi army was in a combat and a military confrontation against the ISIL members. And so far, since 4 days ago, they have been defeated and they have failed actually in regaining this place. According to what I have seen and what I am actually witnessing, the Iraqi army, backed by the Iraqi defenders, have actually prepared a well-defending strategy and even security plan for defending the headquarters, this headquarter. And as according to my knowledge, this area over there is called Al-Nu'aymiyah, and after this complex is the bridge of Al-Tufaha, where the militants were actually taking control of the area. And we have actually witnessed several military confrontations since our arrival in this area, and we are expected to go to the other complex later today to have more footage and even to get more interviews with the people who have been actually occupied by the ISIL members, and we will witness even the people who have been arrested, according to the security officials who have allowed us to come in this area, and they have promised us that we will get more footage and information about the event.
Syria Syrian militants fired mortars at a government-controlled neighborhood in the northern city of Aleppo, killing at least 13 people, including women and children, according to state television. Opposition forces have regularly fired rockets into the city, while clashes for control of Syria's once commercial hub have intensified in recent weeks. Well, those rocket attacks in Aleppo came shortly before a car bomb exploded outside a mosque in the northwestern town of Banish in Idlib province, killing at least 10 people and injuring another 50. The blast occurred as worshippers attended Friday prayers at the Grand Mosque. An amateur video posted online showed several vehicles on fire as people rushed to help the injured, who were treated in nearby hospitals. This as the Syrian army regained full control over Tel al-Jabiya in the southwestern province of Deraa after targeting a long convoy of insurgent vehicles loaded with weapons and ammunition. Meanwhile, in another region of Deraa, the al-Qaeda-linked Nusra Front has posted a video claiming to have killed more than 60 government soldiers. Well, Damascus-based journalist Mohammed Ali joins us now over the phone to discuss more on the violence in Syria. Mohammed, what is the strategic significance of the Syrian army's military advances in Deraa?
As you know, of course, the fighting in Deraa did not stop since the beginning of the unrest. However, there were separate clashes mostly happening over there. We didn't hear for a long time about any wide military operation until today, actually. We heard today that the Syrian army started a wide military operations, a series of military strikes against militants and their port and their headquarters in Nawa, in Deraa. Now, of course, Deraa is a very important province for anyone in control of it because it is on the borderline between Syria and Jordan. And everyone knows that Jordan is one of the main, actually, countries, the borders over there are one of the main axes where foreign-backed militants receive their military and medical support from countries like the United States and the regional and Western countries also. So Deraa is a main gateway for militants there on the borderline with Jordan for the militants to get more aid. However, the Syrian army, the significance of the military operations, of course, such military operations today would not definitely prevent any infiltration attempts from Jordan, but definitely this signals that the army is actually heading towards the battle for Deraa, and that such a military strike today has started this battle over there. And this shows the strength of the army, because as you know, the Syrian army is now engaged in battles in the north of the country, Aleppo, also in areas close to Hama and Deir al-Zor, and of course in Damascus countryside. But despite all of that, we see the army also striking the militants in Deraa, not only defending its checkpoints, which means that the army is powerful and strong enough to start also military operations on other axes and in other cities.
Yes, Mohammed, if you could verify the video posted by the al-Nusra Front claiming to have killed around 60 government soldiers.
Well, this is not the first time we hear the so-called Nusra Front militants or the so-called Islamic Front with all of the brigades it covers claiming that they have killed large numbers of government forces. Now, what we know is that those militants dig tunnels to reach one of the areas that they claim that the Syrian army is in control of and detonate it, causing a huge explosion, and then claiming that tens were killed. However, there was not even one single footage or video that confirms that Syrian army soldiers, tens of them, as they claim, were killed. Nevertheless, we only see some buildings being damaged and detonated by the militants. As you know, since the beginning of the unrest, those militants, especially Catholic ones, are not only after the Syrian army, but also killing civilians and causing huge damage to the infrastructure. Nevertheless, there is nothing, no footage or no confirmed source that can confirm that there are Syrian army soldiers killed or large numbers of them killed.
And does the increase in recent mortar attacks on Aleppo indicate that the militants are being cornered, fearing an army offensive on Syria's once commercial hub?
Can you please repeat the question?
Does the recent increase in mortar attacks on Aleppo indicate that the militants are being cornered and are fearing an army offensive on Aleppo?
As you know, the militants never stopped firing mortar shells in Aleppo, in Damascus, or in any other area they control on civilian areas and military areas. This doesn't actually 100% signal that they are being cornered, but according to the facts on ground, we know that the Syrian army is pressing ahead with its operations in Aleppo. Previously, just in the past month, many parts of Aleppo, particularly south of Aleppo, like Al-Ramousi, Al-Matahan, and Sheikh Said, and Najjar, those areas where the army exerted more pressure on the militants there and regained much more ground. And as a result, we've seen the militants over there in Old Aleppo also striking the Syrian army and firing, as you have just noted, more and more mortar shells, killing civilians and army personnel. So it does signal that they are being cornered, but nevertheless, they are still powerful, especially the so-called Islamic Front. They have control over vast and wide areas of Old Aleppo. And also, we have to take into consideration that Aleppo is one of the most difficult battles for the Syrian army. And the reason is, of course, that it is close to the Turkish borders, one of the main supporters over the Turkish government for the militants, and one of the main supply lines for the militants. So it is a very difficult battle for the Syrian army, as the militants get whatever they wish of military aid and medical aid from Turkey.
All right, Damascus-based journalist Mohammed Ali, thank you for speaking to Ali Tija. A reporter and a photographer for the British Times newspaper are recovering in a Turkish hospital after being kidnapped, shot and beaten while covering the Syrian conflict. The incident has only further highlighted the increasing threats faced by journalists reporting in one of the most dangerous locations on the planet.
Writer Anthony Lloyd and photographer Jack Hill are the latest victims of the unrelenting targeting of journalists by militant groups operating in Syria. The two were attacked on their way back to the Turkish border by the so-called Islamic Front earlier this week. Lloyd, a reporter for The Times, was shot twice in the legs, and both men were badly beaten to stop them from escaping. Since the Syrian crisis began over 3 years ago, the country has become the most dangerous place in the world for journalists. In its 2013 annual report, the monitoring group named the Committee to Protect Journalists counted at least 29 journalists killed while working in Syria. More than 80 have been abducted, and approximately 30 are still missing, bringing the total up to 150 deaths since the violence began in March of 2011. In addition to the deaths, kidnapping has been used as a method of silencing journalists, with over 60 cases reported in 2013 alone. All of the kidnappings are perpetrated by militant groups, particularly the Al-Qaeda offshoot of the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. The ISIL has been condemned by Reporters Without Borders for its extreme hostility towards journalists working in Syria. One of the heartbreaking stories was the recent assassination of the Beirut-based Al-Manar TV channel's crew, when 3 of its workers were shot dead by Islamist fighters while covering the Syrian army advances in the Christian-majority town of Malula. Another tragedy was the murder of the reporter Yara Abbas, a prominent female journalist for Syrian state-owned Al-Akhbariya TV. She was shot by a militant sniper near the military airbase of Daba in the central province of Homs, while performing her duty of telling the truth to the Syrian people.
Syria needs the effort of every one of its residents, and Yara was one of the martyrs who sacrificed her blood for our country. I'm proud of how patriotic Yara was, and she was always very dedicated to report every crime carried out by those militant groups. Yara didn't die. She lives through us and through Syria.
Hundreds of journalists have been detained.
In an unprecedented step, more than a dozen international news organizations have signed a joint letter to the Syrian armed opposition about the disturbing rise in the targeting of journalists in Syria, which has led many outlets to reduce their coverage of the conflict out of safety concerns. Even the Iraqi war, the deadliest conflict for journalists since CPG's founding, did not reach such chilling numbers, and yet the situation is likely to worsen as the governments of the countries from which many of the journalists hail from continue to finance and support extremists fighting to oust Syrian President Bashar al-Assad.
As tensions continue to mount in eastern Ukraine, Moscow has slammed a UN report over the violence in Odessa, saying it was an attempt to whitewash Kiev's actions in the country's east.
The United Nations has warned of an alarming deterioration in human rights in the Donetsk region in eastern Ukraine.
We are concerned about the situation on the ground. What is the impact of those armed groups being able to seize public buildings and occupy them, and eventually have a way to, as I indicated earlier, intimidate or terrorize or attack journalists or unlawfully detain individuals that are in the territories where they do control those public buildings.
The new report by the UN monitoring team was released in Kiev and Geneva on Friday, with the research covering the period from April 2nd to May 6th. However, Russia condemned the 34-page report, describing it as unobjective and politically motivated. The complete lack of objectivity, blatant discrepancies, and double standards leave no doubts that the report's authors were performing a political put-up job aimed at clearing the name of the self-declared authorities in Kiev. The Russian Foreign Ministry stated that the report presented by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights was marked by systematic and routine ignorance of any Kiev involvement in sparking the Odessa carnage. The ministry's statement also remarked that not a single word was said about neo-Nazi elements who engaged in setting buildings on fire with people inside, shooting dead anyone who opposed them, and finishing off the wounded in plain sight. For now, the Foreign Ministry believes that such double standards are a clear indicator of the international organization's mission to pander to a select side in the conflict without any regard for hard evidence.
Although Ukraine's richest man has been largely passive over calls for independence in the country's east, his latest calls for a united Ukraine signal fears that his multi-billion-dollar wealth is on the line.
Ukraine's richest man is stuck between respecting the grievances of his fellow neighbors and ensuring his major enterprises are not compromised. This is multi-billionaire Rinat Akhmetov. His fortune is estimated by Forbes magazine at $11.4 billion. He has a workforce of 300,000 people on his payroll in the industrial hub of Donbass in eastern Ukraine. Ever since anti-government activists started calling for independence in the east, Akhmetov had to tread carefully around local sensitivities and avoid specifically condemning the action of the separatists. But the separatists' declaration of an independent Donetsk region earlier this week, which is part of the Donbass, and their appeal for Russian accession pose a major threat to Akhmetov's holdings and his fortune. Russia hasn't responded yet, and if Donetsk becomes some kind of gray zone unrecognized by the world, Akhmetov's business empire built on exports may very well suffer greatly. The multi-billionaire has now recognized that his earlier passive tactics did not work in his favor, as the pro-independence activists have continued to assert their control of the region. Akhmetov sent his miners and metal workers to join police on patrol in Mariupol on Wednesday to clear barricades, ending the turmoil unleashed by the armed takeover of much of the region.
We understand clearly that if any decisions are made outside the law, the first consequences would be the closure of all markets we have today for our products. Not only us, the leadership and the owners of the company realize this. There are over 300,000 staff, plus their families, so it's a huge army.
Later in an interview, the 47-year-old oligarch told Ukrainian media that he supported a united Ukraine. Though largely symbolic, the scene showed the extent to which the crisis has come to threaten the interests of Ukraine's richest man and the lengths he will go to protect them.
Europe's Energy Commissioner announced that Moscow is the EU's main natural gas trading partner, and therefore there should be no sanctions against Russia's energy sector over the crisis in Ukraine.
The Russian partners are most important providers of gas for the markets of the European Union. It has been like that for over 40 years. We all agree that we in the European Union consider the energy sector, especially gas, are sectors which are inappropriate for a list of possible sanctions against Russia. That means that despite the crisis, we are ready to continue the gas partnership. Russia delivers gas, Europe pays for gas.
Well, on the podium, Canada has expressed some of the toughest rhetoric against Russia's stance over the crisis in Ukraine, imposing economic sanctions against almost 80 officials and businesses. But a closer look at its sanctions list has revealed a softer approach towards Moscow by the government in Ottawa as it weighs its interests with one of the most important providers of oil and gas to the region.
As the US and many of its Western allies continue to impose more and more sanctions against Russia over the recent turmoil in Ukraine, many have voiced their support, but not everyone seems to be following up on the tough rhetoric.
That's a lot.
Canada, for one, seems to be putting its own interests first. Reports have emerged that Ottawa broke with Washington and did not impose sanctions on two key allies of Russian President Vladimir Putin because the pair had Canadian business interests. Canada is home to 1.2 million Ukrainians and has imposed sanctions on more than 80 Russian and Ukrainian officials and businesses, compared to about 60 by the US. But unlike its neighbor, Canada has not moved against Sergei Chemezov, who heads state-owned industrial and defense conglomerate Rostec, and Igor Sechin, CEO of oil giant Rosneft. Both men, who are close to Putin, have business ties to Canada. Asked about the decision not to go after either Sechin or Chemezov, a Canadian government source familiar with Ottawa's sanctions strategy said their goal was to sanction Russia, not to sanction or penalize Canadian companies.
Great, thanks for the opportunity to do that.
The statement contradicts the official government approach. Prime Minister Stephen Harper said earlier in March that Canada would not shape its foreign policy to commercial interests. The revelations highlight the degree to which many Western leaders are tempering their criticism of Moscow, worried about business ties with Russia, a major provider of oil and gas to the region. As a result, analysts are questioning the level of both determination and support in the West when it comes to punishing Russia.
A Russian Proton rocket carrying an advanced communications satellite fell back to Earth shortly after liftoff in the latest accident to hit the country's once proud space industry. State television showed the Proton and its Express AM-4P satellite, reported to be worth $29 million, burning up in the upper layers of the atmosphere above the Pacific Ocean. Russian space officials said the rocket's control engine failed 545 seconds after it took off. You're watching Ali Tijah World News, still to come. India's Narendra Modi declares victory as his BJP heads towards a historic landslide win in the country's general election. Welcome back to Ali Tijah World News. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Another round of nuclear talks between Iran and the P5+1 comes to an end with no tangible progress. The Iraqi army continues with its push to root out ISIS militants from the western province of Anbar. Terrorist attacks across Syria killed dozens of civilians as government troops continue to secure more ground. And Moscow slams a UN report on rights abuses in eastern Ukraine, saying it whitewashes Kiev's actions.
We're talking about issues that have to do with intimidation.
A 19-year-old Bahraini young man was killed in the village of Sitra, south of the capital Manama. According to Bahrain's main opposition group, the Al-Wifaq Party, Saudi-backed Bahraini forces have been tracking the whereabouts of Ali Faisal al-Aqrawi. With the death of al-Aqrawi, the number of Bahrainis killed by regime forces since the February 14th revolution in 2011 has risen to at least 124. Marking the Gulf Detainees Day, a human rights group has called for the release of thousands of political prisoners held behind bars in 6 different countries across the oil-rich Persian Gulf states.
A Gulf rights group has called for the release of thousands of prisoners of conscience in the oil-rich Arab states of the Persian Gulf, as it marked what it called Gulf Detainees Day to highlight their plight. The Arab monarchies in the Persian Gulf do not allow political parties, and criticism of rulers can easily land someone in jail. In a statement published online, the head of the Gulf Forum for Civil Societies, Anwar al-Rashid, said, "We call for the release of prisoners and detainees who have been put behind bars for simply expressing their opinion." Rashid said that there are between 30,000 and 40,000 opinion prisoners and detainees in the 6-nation Gulf Cooperation Council, which groups Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. The overwhelming majority of the prisoners are held in Saudi Arabia, followed by Bahrain. The detainees include doctors, teachers, writers, parliamentarians, activists, politicians, and others. The group also spoke of cases in which prisoners have remained in jail even after serving their terms. In other instances, people have been stripped of their basic rights, including a ban on travel after they were released. The group's new figures only add more evidence to the already proven cases of torture and human rights violations, leaving many to wonder and ask, why hasn't the international community done anything for the thousands locked behind bars in the Arab monarchies of the Persian Gulf?
The Israeli construction minister has said that the number of Jewish settlers in the Israeli-occupied West Bank could grow as much as 50% by 2019. As most world powers deem the Israeli settlements illegal, the Palestinians themselves have blamed settlement expansions for the breakdown last month of US-mediated peace talks, a position supported in part by Washington. At least 2 people were killed and another 24 injured in fierce clashes that erupted in Libya's eastern city of Benghazi between Islamist militants and forces led by retired General Khalifa Haftar. Witnesses said the group led by the former rebel chief was backed by warplanes that shelled bases belonging to Ansar al-Sharia and another Islamist militant group in Benghazi. Yemeni warplanes targeted al-Qaeda positions in the southern province of Shabwa, causing huge losses as part of an army offensive launched in late April. The warplanes struck al-Qaeda positions in Azan, Jalal Rida and Al Said, south of the town of Atak, as residents fled the region. The raids, according to local sources, inflicted heavy losses on the extremist group. The Yemeni army has been staging assaults against al-Qaeda to eradicate the group from the south of the country. India's Narendra Modi has declared victory, telling cheering supporters that good times are coming. The announcement follows the release of preliminary results which revealed a landslide victory of Modi's BJP.
In his first comments following preliminary election results, Modi thanked his supporters for their love, which propelled him and his Hindu Nationalist Party to a historic election win.
Good days are coming. After filing my nomination from Vadodara, I was able to spend only 50 minutes here, but you gave me 70,000 votes. I bow in front of the people of Vadodara for the love in each of the voters worked as Narendra Modi.
Latest results showed that Modi's BJP party has won a staggering 284 seats so far, while the ruling Congress party has garnered a mere 44. Earlier, BJP supporters declared the beginning of a new era in the world's second most populous country, with their party on track in securing the first parliamentary majority by a single bloc in 30 years. Preliminary figures from the Election Commission forecasted the BJP winning more than 272 seats, required for a majority on its own in the 543-seat parliament. Chief Minister of the thriving state of Gujarat since 2001, Modi's victory came at the expense of the ruling Congress party, which has conceded defeat in elections that exposed anger about economic growth and rampant corruption.
I've been to Gujarat and I saw good roads, good infrastructure, good hotels. It was quite like America. When Modi comes, there will be progress.
With Modi, there'll definitely be change. We've had the Congress party for 10 years. They've done nothing in that time.
Most of India's 1.2 billion people, more than half of whom are under 25, were not even born the last time a party had secured such a commanding position. However, this outright dominance has raised some concerns. The 63-year-old's rise to power is closely being monitored by India's 150 million Muslims. Anti-Muslim violence in his home state of Gujarat in 2002, which left more than 1,000 people, mostly Muslims, dead, has led India's Muslim community to look on with caution.
People are scared because of what has happened in the past, and for people to realize that a man's nature has changed, he has to make an effort to change his actions.
Despite these concerns, the stunning results have exceeded all forecasts. The triumph has redrawn India's political map, transforming the BJP from a party with support mostly in the northern Hindi-speaking belt to a pan-national force with a huge mandate for change. The first change the BJP will need to deliver on is an overhaul of the economy, growing at its slowest rate in a decade. Its commitment to its Hindu nationalist agenda, however, needs to be carefully pursued in light of religious tensions within various parts of the country.
Let's speak to political analyst Sayed Andrabi, who joins us now from London. Mr. Andrabi, will Modi live up to his promises of reviving the economy?
Yeah, he has been, that was his main plank, the development. He has been promising all things about the economy, but now it has to be seen. But in his campaign, it was a very powerful campaign, it was a highly resourceful campaign, and the money came from the Indian corporates. So there is a huge corporate interest involved in Modi's election and in his being elected. So Modi has to deliver, and he has to do something about the economy and liberalize it. And there's a huge market out there, almost 1 billion people, and BJP, by its very economic doctrine, by its very economic philosophy, has always been a sort of right-wing liberalist party. So Modi will have no hesitation in bringing about more structural reforms and liberalizing the Indian economy.
Will India relive its past of secular violence under the BJP? Many associate the 2002 riots that took place in the Gujarat state to Modi.
Yeah, that's right, because there were huge riots in 2002 and Muslims were killed, and even now if you go to Gujarat, if you go to the capital of Gujarat, Ahmedabad, there are Muslim areas and Hindu areas. Even now Muslims are scared of living with Hindus after that riot of 2002. And Modi, throughout the election campaign, he was asked by people that he should express some regret or apology or something of that sort, but nothing has come from BJP or Modi himself, and that's why Muslims have fears that how will be his tenure as Prime Minister. But since now he is going to be Prime Minister, and when it comes to governance, maybe he will have to reconcile with the realities, and he can't take liberties which otherwise BJP could take if it was not in the government.
How much did the Congress party's failings help the BJP in winning?
People say, and I myself believe, that was the major contributor towards the BJP's victory, because Congress had ruled for long, and there was a genuine anti-incumbency wave which is everywhere, that when there's a ruling party for years, then people say, well, let's go for a change. But then it's up to the governing party, up to the ruling party. They have to come to the people and they have to explain them what we have done. They have to explain to them that we were not wasting time all these years. We have done certain things for you. And to be honest, Congress party in these years has done something for the Indian people. And there was a very good article in Financial Times here in London. The author has said that was a sort of non-political, it was a sort of academic evaluation of what is happening. The author had said that it was because of the Congress policies throughout all these years that a huge number of Indian people, they came out of the poverty line, and from a simple petitioner class, they became an aspiring class. Now the aspiring class, and it is an irony that the aspiring class which was created by Congress, they are not looking for Congress for the fulfillment of their aspirations. They are looking for Modi, because Modi has presented himself as someone who can fulfill their dreams. And on the contrary, Congress has come up. It has come through as a party of status quo. So so behind the victory of BJP, there is a huge contribution of how Congress has failed. It has failed to communicate to the people of what it had done, and that's its main failure.
So has the Gandhi family specifically lost its appeal to the Indian electorate?
Yeah, that's right. For the time being it has, but we must understand that the house of Gandhi, they are central to the Congress party. Congress party had briefly, after the death of Rajiv Gandhi, they had a president by the name Sitaram Kesri, but it did not work. Congress is integrally linked to the dynasty of Gandhis, and to be honest, Gandhis have done something for the Congress. Indira Gandhi, the late Prime Minister, Rajiv Gandhi, the late Prime Minister, they laid down their lives, and Congress has a sort of moral, the Gandhis have a sort of moral weight within Congress, and Congress people, they recognize their contribution, and so do the Indian people who are inclined to Congress. So I think this will be a temporary loss. The Gandhi family will have some temporary, it is a sort of embarrassment for them, but it won't last. They will regain their position in the Congress.
All right, political analyst Saeed Andrabi, thank you for sharing your thoughts on this. Four days after a deadly mine accident in the western Turkish town of Soma left over 280 people dead, rescuers are continuing to search for 18 miners believed to be trapped underground. This as devastation and fury grip the country, with many accusing the government of negligence.
Public fury towards the government has been growing across Turkey as rescue operations continued in Soma following the nation's worst mining disaster, where an explosion earlier this week left over 280 people dead. Turkish police fired tear gas and water cannons to disperse the several thousand protesters marching in the town Soma, who accused the government and the mining industry of negligence. The exact cause of the disaster is still unknown, but the operator of the Turkish mine rejected claims the disaster was due to negligence.
It was definitely not caused by the transformer. Actually, they forgot to remove the extracted coal from the mine. It was the coal that was left inside the mine which started the fire.
During his visit to Soma, Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan announced that the coal mine had passed inspections with no reported violations, but some former miners have criticized the way mine inspections are carried out in Turkey.
The company calls the inspectors and they come. The mining company shuts down the shaft they work in, tells the inspectors it's not being used, and that's it. Once the inspectors are gone, they reopen that shaft. They should hold inspections unannounced.
Most of the 787 workers inside had oxygen masks, but smoke and gas spread so quickly that many were unable to escape, with 284 confirmed dead and 18 others still trapped. As the hours pass and the gravity of the tragedy becomes even clearer, it remains a nightmare to the relatives waiting at the scene, anxious to receive news of their loved ones.
All right, here's a recap of tonight's top stories. Another round of nuclear talks between Iran and the P5+1 comes to an end with no tangible progress. The Iraqi army continues with its push to root out ISIS militants from the western province of Anbar. Terrorist attacks across Syria killed dozens of civilians as government troops continue to secure more ground. And Moscow slams a UN report on rights abuses in eastern Ukraine, saying it whitewashes Kiev's actions.
We're talking about issues that have to do with intimidation.
Well, that's all from me and the Al Jazeera News team. Thank you very much for watching and good night.